So this is one of those videos where we want to get the disclaimer out the way quickly. So these videos will make you question everything, and these conspiracies will make you question everything. So remember, this is for entertainment purposes only. All right, so this next video, man, they talking about Olympic sports, doping, and how it actually works. Seriously, let's get into it.
My name is Victor Conti, and I was the mastermind behind the distribution of designer steroids in the Olympics and other international competitions. This is how crime works. I know because I was on the dark side for 4 years. Circumventing the testing was like taking candy from a baby. A lot of the athletes that I worked with got very good results and broke world records and won gold medals. And of course, that brought attention to me and brought scrutiny and eventually law enforcement. BALCO was founded in 1984, Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative. I got a facility and I built the laboratory from the ground up. We did comprehensive blood testing for athletes, and then I designed supplement programs for them. The clear I was buying from a chemist, Patrick Arnold, and he told me that he had this liquid substance that seemed to help with athletes' recovery. So I bought a bottle of this stuff for, I think, $150. It was a 100cc bottle, and you took an eyedropper and you put a couple drops under your tongue. He called it stuff, which now is referred to as THG, tetrahydrogestrinone. Somehow, this chemist, he created a whole new steroid, okay? And so I got some, I tried it myself. When I tested my own urine, it came back clean. It was because they weren't testing for that because it wasn't on the market. And if it was not illegal and it was undetectable, then I started giving it to athletes, what became known as the clear at the time, which was simply an undetectable designer steroid. The first athlete that I gave the clear to was Bill Romanowski, a football player. And then I started giving it to other world-class athletes like sprinter Tim Montgomery and some other track members of the 2000 Olympic team.
Now, the $1 million question is, did the athletes know? Right? I hope they speak about that. Because oftentimes you hear when these get brought up, the athletes will be like, well, I wasn't aware of what I was getting or all the supplements that I was taking. I had no knowledge or stuff like that. You'll hear that type of verbiage being used when it comes out that they've tested positive for something, and it always goes to that. We didn't know, I was unaware, I was taking this, didn't know it had that, this, that, and the third. So I want to see if they go there and address that portion of it, because this is something that has always been talked about, and athletes, this always surrounds athletes, man.
We started with the blood testing to determine what specific nutrients that the athlete would need. And it's not about taking mega doses of any one nutrient or any one drug. It's about a proper balance. We were using multiple different drugs. The clear, I realized that this is way too strong to be used in the manner that I was told that it was being used. I had the athletes take a very different dosage, much lower, on Monday. And then on Tuesday, I developed this cream that had epitestosterone and testosterone to keep your TE ratio in balance. That was kind of a masking agent. So they would take the clear Monday, the cream Tuesday, the clear Wednesday, the cream Thursday, then be off on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, they were taking other drugs like growth hormone. You typically do that daily at night. A lot of people believe that, it was all about the clear. We were using other types of drugs, including EPO. EPO is a hormone that your body naturally produces. It gets manufactured in the bone marrow, and it stimulates the production of red blood cells. So this really enhances stamina and endurance. You can do more repetitions at a higher intensity. The definition that I got one time from a world-class sprinter was It turns you into a machine. You simply do not get tired.
Now, who do we blame for this? Of course, you want to blame the athlete. That's a given. But also, these athletes are doing it for what? These sponsorships. The Olympics are taking place right now. And one thing I kept hearing over and over is what it means to achieve gold or different things, or you know, how this stuff is life-changing as far as endorsements go. So when that carrot is dangled in front of your face, that's when all of the other stuff starts to come into play on what you'll do or take to get to that finish line, so to speak.
Once I received the drugs from the various sources, I would create a calendar for the next month on what days to take the cream, what days to take the clear, what days to inject the growth hormone, what days to inject the EPO. Everybody called it Victor's short leash. I would send the clear and the cream in little packets and use FedEx. Now, of course, I would talk to them on the phone and consult with them. Some of them came and actually, you know, we would go train near BALCO at the time. And so I was creating the programs and supervising the programs. And of course, I knew I was breaking the law. But I also knew that these crimes were very soft. So in my thinking, it was, okay, if something happens, then do the crime, serve the time. Marion Jones's coach approached me first. They were at a track meet over in Europe. And basically, initially, the communication was between her husband and I and her coach and I. So I sent a box to North Carolina that had these substances in it, and she started using them. We designed the highest and best use of the growth hormone that we had, so after specific events, to aid recovery for the next event, she was using growth hormone. During the games, with us fully knowing that they were not testing for growth hormone. She won 3 gold medals and 2 bronze at the Olympic Games in Sydney, Australia in the year 2000. She was the absolute golden girl of the Olympic Games. She was doing Nike commercials, Can You Dig It? General Motors, Sports Illustrated. I was very excited to be there sitting at the 100-meter finish line when she ran that very fast race and won by over 4 meters. My role was very small. So I can't take credit for her victories or her medals. She was a great number 1 from 1997 until 2000. So she dominated for 3 years before I ever met her. Let me, for a moment, just say that I feel very bad for Marion Jones. What I know is that the other girls that were in that 100-meter race with her, they didn't get their emails or tap their phone or do the things that they did to Marion Jones. You know, she was held to a different standard. I don't think that's right, and I feel very sad for what happened to her. Steroids are prohibited. They're on what's called a prohibited substances list. In Olympic sport, the first testing was in 1968. In 1976, they only had a test for anabolic steroids, about a dozen, but no test for testosterone, the granddaddy. So everybody there, they called it the testosterone games. Thereafter, they didn't have out-of-competition testing compared to in-competition testing until it was implemented in 1990. So in 1988, when Flojo broke the world record in the 100 meters and 200 meters and all that, there was no testing out of competition. All they had to do was taper off these drugs, show up at the Olympics, and put on these monstrous performances. You know, when you use these powerful drugs, it's during training camp where the benefits come. And they carry over for months and months, if not years. So an athlete that's competing in September in the Olympics is using drugs the previous October, November, December, right, with intensive weight training. Even now, today, they test you at a competition, but the athletes are not stupid enough to have this in their system. It's when they were using it months before, and then they get the carryover benefits. What the testers were doing.
Oh, he's spilling all the beans on y'all, bro. Y'all, there's no way these athletes are gonna be able to get away with some of this stuff anymore, man. And then you wonder why certain athletes that you may see in certain competitions not make it to the Olympics. Here's some of the reasons why. Because they can't test negative. They would test positive for all type of things. So that's why you don't see some of these people. You ever wonder why this person we see on this competition on ES or somewhere else, we don't see them in the Olympics? Interesting. They're only in those competitions that don't test them.
Doing before BALCO, even at the Olympic level, is they only tested endurance athletes that were running 10,000 meters or marathon because they didn't understand that EPO is not a performance drug that you use on the day of the competition. It's a training drug. Well, as an example, in Sydney, Australia in 2000, they did not test anybody except the long distance runners for EPO. So the sprinters, Marion Jones, and other athletes that I worked with there, they weren't even tested for growth hormone, which we used, or EPO, which we use. These are both endogenous hormones. So circumventing the testing was like taking candy from a baby. It was very simple. So we were actually using growth hormone at the competition between events. I never had any contact directly with the International Olympic Committee or the United States Olympic Committee, even though later I did meet with WADA, USADA, the actual drug testing entity. So that's not the Olympic Committee. WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, was founded in the year 1999 for the 2000 Olympics, where I was in Sydney with Marion. Was it founded for the health and safety of the athletes and to create a level playing field? In my opinion, it was founded to protect the logos of the sponsors of the Olympic Games. You have what is called TOP. TOP stands for the Olympic Partner Program. That's how they raised the $2 billion, and that comes from 14 companies. Originally McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Toyota, Panasonic, now it's Airbnb. The reason they have all these loopholes is because they, my opinion, they generally don't desire to catch these athletes because it's bad for business. I had met an Olympic official who had told me about some positive drug test cover-ups that he knew about that occurred at the 1988 Olympics. And at the 1992 trials, U.S. track and field trials in New Orleans, I was working with a shot putter named Greg Trefalis. And he was taking steroids, including Dianabol. So he got fourth. He didn't make the team. But he'd been on the previous 1988 Olympic team, and I went with him to Seoul, Korea. But a few days after the competition, I got a call from this Olympic official, and he said, "Your boy has tested positive." A few days after that, I get a second call from this Olympic official, and he says, "Tell your boy that he's off the hook." I said, "What do you mean he's off the hook?" And he said, well, the elder statesmen got together and decided that this was just not a good time for these positive drug tests to come out. Apparently there were 5 positive drug tests, including a high jumper, and my shot putter, Greg, was one of them. And he said, they've just decided it's not a good time and they're going to sweep them under the rug. I realized that basically from the top to the bottom, I mean the television networks, the International Olympic Committee, WADA, the testing agency, the athletes, they are all a part of this corruption. And I believe the athletes are the victims of this corruption. They're in a system and they get there and they realize that there's a rampant use of drugs and it develops a use or lose mentality. And if you know that your competitor's doing it 80% of the time, in my opinion, that enables you to make that decision to join that culture. But the athletes basically have no choice.
Listen, man, I ain't trying to ruin the sports world and Olympics for y'all, man, and different gaming and things like that. But you have to know that this type of corruption takes place. You're hearing it from one of the horse's mouths. You're hearing it from him. How it is. How it is. It's hard. I know it's so hard for you to hear, man, but it's true. And it's not just the athletes that participate. It's the higher ups that control the things. Who does it benefit? Does it benefit this athlete who might be using to not be here at the Olympics, where all these people showed up for, where all these sponsors are doing this? Like, he's a link in that chain, and they need him. And that's where the corrupt, man, it's that money, bro. That money will make people do some things, some morally incorrect things. I know it. I know it's hard to hear, bro. I know it. And excuse my manners. How do y'all feel about athletes taking steroids? Because contrary to popular belief, some people don't mind that athletes take steroids. Some people don't mind. They don't care. They prefer it. I've heard it come out of people's mouths before. So let me know, how do y'all actually feel about this?
Russia had state-sponsored doping. There was a massive conspiracy there where I believe from the very top, meaning Putin down, and I actually talked to Grigory Rodchenkov, who was the head of the Moscow lab that is featured in the Icarus film. What he was doing was he used, similar to what I did with liquid under the tongue, he took 1,000 athletes and he collected urine samples. Then he gave them all these designer type, it had alcohol in it to help the absorption, to all these athletes. They won big medals in 2012 at the Olympics, 2013 at the track and field, and he paid enormous dollars to bring these events into Russia. So that the samples, when they came in, they were all marked. They knew who the Russian athletes were. They cut a hole in the wall and put a piece of furniture in front of it. And next door, the FSB, the equivalent of the FBI over there, they were removing the urine that was in the container, had steroids in it from the competition. They'd figured out a way to take the lid off, clean it, and put in the clean urine. Then they pushed it back through the wall, and they ran a report on that. So it was a huge conspiracy, very smart. He had to escape. He's under the witness protection program here in the United States. Well, SNAC is the name of my company, and ZMA is the name of the product. I first created the idea for ZMA in 1996. It is a nighttime anabolic formula to help you get a deeper sleep so that your body secretes more growth hormone. Many people fail to realize that the product that I developed, ZMA, with over 100 distributors around the world, that I had made millions of dollars. So in 1999 and 2000, I'd already made probably $5 million by that point. So I was not doing this for the money. I was doing this really for the challenge, for the excitement, for the fun. It was like a hobby for me. They try to put me into this classification of a strength and conditioning coach or trainer or sports nutritionist. I call myself a project team leader. Whatever that project is, that means that I finance it, I hire the people that are involved, I pay them, they don't pay me. In general, I was never paid by athletes. For Marion Jones specifically, there was one check, and I believe it was in the amount of $7,000 and change. After the Olympic Games in 2000, when we put together what I called Project World Record, and this involved Charlie Francis, who I hired. He was the sprint coach for Ben Johnson, who in 1988 tested positive at the Olympic Games. I hired Milos Sarcev, who was a very popular bodybuilder, probably been on over 100 magazine covers, to do the strength and conditioning. It was Tim Montgomery, the athlete, and his coach at the time was Trevor Graham. So I flew everybody out from Toronto, Los Angeles, North Carolina, We met at BALCO and we created this plan. And in the 2001 season, he won silver indoor and silver outdoor world championship medals. During Project World Record, I did not pay Tim Montgomery, I did not pay Trevor Graham, but I did pay Charlie Francis, and I did pay Milos Sarcev. And this is 20 years ago, but I believe Charlie, I paid him something like $2,000 a day. What I was gaining from that is the promotion. Back then, the athletes were wearing shirts and promoting ZMA, and of course, Tim Montgomery wore the ZMA logo, and he won the United States Championship in the 100 meters in 2001. Marion Jones did not actually go to prison for using drugs. She became involved in a check fraud scheme and also for lying to a federal agent. She didn't go to prison actually for anything to do with doping in sport. Ultimately, what I went to prison for was for distributing. I had a prescription for cream, testosterone cream. So I took that and I added some epitestosterone to it, but with each time you would do it, you'd only do like a half a gram. So I had enough to supply twice a week, maybe max 25, 30 athletes. The entire amount of drugs that they confiscated that I was charged with was $1,700 worth street value and fit in a shoebox. So it was under 250 units, and the crime was 0 to 6 months. I served 4 months in a prison camp. I have a lot of regrets. The most difficult part of all for me was the shame that I brought to my family. And I was reckless because I didn't think about my own family. I didn't think about the family of the athletes that were involved. I didn't understand in the beginning that those on the peripheral, those not directly involved, how widespread the damage that I had caused would be. The drug testing.
I'm surprised though that like a lot of the athletes just was like, okay, this guy says this will do this, take this, and they just took it. Like, no, did you research? Did you, like, you get what I'm saying? Like, I'm just surprised that this one man, and I know it's not just him, I know it's more than just him. He just seems like the fall guy, number one, and the guy that's willing to speak about it, talk about it, drop names, name everybody who's involved in it, you know? That seems to be his role, but I'm surprised, man, because I'm like, really? This dude just come along and say, I heard about this, it was $150, so I started incorporating, and then I told the athletes about it, and they started saying, hey, let me get that, and I started implementing and giving them a calendar of what days they should take it on. Huh? Bro, when did we get just so, you know what I mean? Just so trustworthy in people's word of what they're giving you.
That they are doing now before the 2024 Olympics has got all sorts of loopholes in it, and it is very easy for the athletes to use PEDs. They have in-competition tests and out-of-competition tests. And during the out-of-competition, they don't even test for about 80 stimulants and narcotics. So you can use all these drugs in training, but they only test for them at the competition. So right there's a loophole you can drive a Mack truck through. The other substances, they're not using designer steroids, they're using endogenous hormones, which is testosterone, growth hormone, insulin, EPO, and they're microdosing, and they're often times doing this at night. So when the collectors come in the morning, their levels are back down below the allowable limits, as they say. Many supplements that are widely available, ZMA, creatine, there's a lot of supplements that really help to accelerate healing and tissue repair. There are a lot of things that are legal performance-enhancing substances. The sensitivity of the equipment, they can detect at lower levels. So the testing is getting better. And I believe that if the athletes became of the opinion that the testing was effective, that they'd like to compete without using drugs. They really would. They'd like to know that they're the best athlete out there and they did it with all the hard work and it wasn't just about PEDs. But they're forced to do it because this is what it takes in order to be competitive. We know that in a 100-meter race that the use of PEDs will make you 2 to 4 meters faster. You can't even get anywhere near the final of an Olympic 100-meter race without doing something. That's just the way it is. That's my opinion. If you remember back in the baseball days of Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco hitting all those home runs, this is what the fans want. They like the train wrecks. They want to know, what's all the dirt, what's the secrets. And I don't know if you've heard about this new enhanced games that they're planning. One of the co-founders of PayPal, a billionaire, and others, supposedly in 2025, are going to allow the athletes under medical supervision to use drugs and then hold a competition. I do not.
That's why I just posed that question. I told you, it's people that want to see, and it'll sell out. It'll go crazy. I've heard people say it. Back when he was talking about the Mark McGwire stuff like that, and they were talking about Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa and all that type of stuff, they was like, sports would be boring without it. Some people said sports would be boring. We want to see him go out there, and when he hit the baseball, it disintegrate. Their argument was nobody wants to be at a boring game with no home runs or no, out of the park home runs or out of the stadium home runs. That they enjoy, that's part of the game to them. So some people don't care, do not care. And I guarantee you, if that comes out, it'll probably break all type of streaming records as far as people watching it. I promise you.
Do not think it's a good idea. I think the general thinking of athletes is if a little bit's good, a lot's going to be great. And then they have a tendency to overdo it, and the next thing you know, they're doing self-harm. Performance-enhancing drugs can be very dangerous. There have been Tour de France riders that have died from using EPO. Stimulants can cause cardiac arrest. Liver enzymes get elevated and you damage your liver. There's a lot of potential side effects. Now, let me say that some substances like testosterone, when used in moderation, are not that harmful. And I myself have a prescription and use testosterone. I've done everything in my power to be outspoken and work with people that have the same desire as I do, which is to reduce the abuse of performance-enhancing drugs. So it's kind of given me a purpose. It's important for me for people to understand that ever since I walked out of that prison camp, that I've been clean. I first became an anti-doping advocate in February of 2005. Right now, my focus is on working with world-class boxers. In the last decade, I have worked with 28 world champions. We have a training facility called SNAC, which that acronym stands for Scientific Nutrition for Advanced Conditioning. And those boxers are tested by WADA, Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, which is very stringent testing. The very first athlete in the world that has done 24/7, 365 testing with WADA is Nonito Donaire. Nonito Donaire was my fighter. I believe my group of SNAC fighters are the cleanest fighters in the entire sport. People say, well, he's so smart that if he tricked us before, he can trick us again. It's now been 12 years that I've been involved with boxing and advocating drug testing. We do live in a society of second chances, and people can and do change.